Hey everyone, it's Dr. Scott and Patrick here with Healthy You. And so today we're going to be talking about something that has been a hot button topic for a long time here in our practice. And we want to dig in heavy on understanding what nutrition is and learning the difference between healthy and unhealthy foods. So we're going to talk about a presentation that I've given for a long time called Food is Medicine. And so Patrick and I are going to go through today and we're going to discuss what inflammatory foods are. Pat, how often in the practice do you hear people asking questions about nutrition?
All the time, guys. You know, 3 pillars to our health. It's nutrition, exercise, and restoration. And nutrition is, I think, one of the topics that we know the least about, at least in the general public. So we get questions all the time about what should I eat, when should I eat, you know, what's good for me, what's bad for me, why is it good or why is it bad? And inflammation is a big part of that discussion.
Yeah, so what we're going to dig in today is we want to start understanding what inflammation is and then diseases that have been shown by science to be caused by low-grade chronic systemic inflammation, right? That term is one you want to etch in your memory because you're going to hear it a lot and it's a really important thing to understand. So we're going to spend some time digging into that topic in quite some depth today. So Pat, you know, when we start talking about nutrition, I find that there's a lot of confusion. When you talk with patients out here on the floor and you're working with athletes, do you find that's the same issue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's something that as an educational standpoint, we're really lacking. And a lot of times we get those questions that come up and how they can relate to their performance, whether it's activities of daily living or sports performance.
Yep. And that's the thing that we see here as a day-to-day struggle. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about first what it really means to have inflammation. So when you start talking about inflammation, you have to understand that there is a very strong diet-health connection. When you start talking about terms, I'm going to identify several key terms here I want you to understand. The first one is inflammation. We understand what the inflammatory process is at a basic nature, but inflammation as a whole is a really important part of our healing, right? Every time that we have an injury, every time that, and let's take, for example, you have a bump, a bruise, a cut, a scrape, anything like that, the body has to create inflammation to heal that. Well, the next term is chronic low-grade inflammation. This is systemic, and these are the things that are caused by foods or chemicals that we're exposed to, toxicity. Because now what we're looking at is a long-term, ongoing process and what it does to our bodies. And believe me, when you understand at a deeper level what chronic low-grade inflammation is, it's very damaging to our body and it really robs us of our health over time. The third one is pro-inflammatory foods, and pro-inflammatory foods are something that we're going to dig into here quite a bit. Because once you understand what pro-inflammatory foods are, then it makes the process of understanding much better. And then we're also going to talk about foods that are considered to be anti-inflammatory. So let's go ahead and dig in. What do you say?
Absolutely, let's get started.
All right. So first let's talk about omega-6s. Pat, do you understand the difference between omega-6s and omega-3s?
Yeah, and so guys, let me share that with you just real briefly. Dr. Scott can dive in more depth. But omega-6s, routinely, they increase inflammation in the body, whereas omega-3s decrease inflammation. If that ratio becomes too out of whack, that low-grade inflammation can become long-term and cause all kinds of detrimental health effects.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, when you consider what the imbalances are, like it's a big deal, right? Like not a little deal, like a huge deal. So the ideal ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s in the American in our body is supposed to be 4 omega-6s to every 1 omega-3. You want to know what the actual ratio is in the typical American diet right now?
Get ready.
Try 50 to 1. So do you know what that means? That means in the vast majority of people that are living in the United States today, we are living in a state where our body is constantly inflamed. So what does that mean in real health terms? It means that our immune systems are always on the attack and always in healing mode. Ladies and gentlemen, when you understand that low-grade chronic systemic inflammation means that this immune system that we need, that is supposed to be there as our defender, as our healer in our body, it's literally fighting all the wrong battles because the foods that we eat are causing inflammation that makes our immune system have to go and fix every single cell that is affected by this inflammatory process. It's a significant health issue. So, when you talk about that, then one of the natural things is, well, okay, so I kind of get this at a basic level, but what really is low-grade chronic inflammation, and what kind of diseases are caused by it?
Yeah, that's a great example. When Dr. Scott first started talking to me about this whole point, I thought of it very simply as our bodies are like a race car, right? And inflammation is kind of like, well, how thick is the oil in our car, right? When we have chronic low-grade inflammation, it's kind of like the viscosity of the oil is too thick, and the body's always in overdrive trying to push it through and trying to deal with it and work with it, and it wears us out, and it causes all sorts of detrimental health effects, of which I'm sure you can create a huge list.
Yeah, well, and that's actually one of the things I want to kind of run through with you, because when you start looking at this, right? So there have been so many diseases that have been directly linked to chronic low-grade inflammation. I'm just going to start reading some of these from you here. So things like irritable bowel syndrome, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, Alzheimer's disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, hypertension, coronary artery disease, increased rates for heart attack and stroke, certain types of cancers, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, gallstone formation, sleep apnea, eczema, psoriasis, macular degeneration, multiple sclerosis, asthma, COPD, endometriosis, prostate disease, Parkinson's disease, headaches, fibromyalgia, and many, many, many more. I could go on and on forever, because it's all of the things that we're all hearing and seeing every single day, right? I'm sure as you're sitting here, you're thinking, well, so I know this one that has it, I know this one, maybe even I have it. Well, the whole point of talking about this is if we can raise awareness. Guess what happens once you have awareness? When your eyes are opened, you can't close them anymore. Now you have choices that you have to make. Because once your eyes have been opened, what do you have to do?
Hey, you have to make a stance. Either you're going to do what your body needs and you're going to help yourself out, or you can turn a blind eye. But we just read a long list of all the reasons we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and it really is. And the problem that we're seeing is that we are becoming progressively sicker in this country. And if you want to stop it, then you have to take action. And information is action, and what this video is a starting point for you. And what I hope will come from this is that not only will you take this information and start doing something with it, but you begin a process of self-discovery and starting to research and starting to really dig in on how important nutrition is. Because when you look at the long-term effects of poor nutrition on your body, for yourself and for your children, it's pretty significant. I mean, in this country, the single greatest expenditure that we put out for our entire country is the cost for long-term care for people that develop chronic diseases. And we see this in all of our loved ones, right? Our aging moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, people that are dealing with the long-term effects of heart disease and lung issues and diabetes. And boy, it seems like everybody has diabetes right now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so what's even scarier is, the Alzheimer's dementia links, they're actually showing in the research that it is likely a central neuropathy. We know of peripheral neuropathy being a side effect of long-term diabetes, but they're showing in the research that it actually may be a central neuropathy, where the long-term consumption of sugars causes damage to our brains, causing us to lose progressively more function in our nervous systems, becoming more forgetful, and of course going down that whole vicious cycle of Alzheimer's. Scary, scary stuff that makes you want to take action, doesn't it?
Yeah, for real, guys. That's a real life nightmare, and it's something that if it's avoidable, well, let's find out how, and let's start to make the right action steps to avoid it.
Oh yeah. So let's talk about what the modern diet actually looks like. And many of you, as you're sitting here, you're going to be going off your mental checklist and saying, that's us, that's us, that's us, that's us. So let's just give some ratios here. So what we're looking at here is that about 10% of our diets are dairy, right? And dairy can be inflammatory, or it can be considered to be neutral, but it can be something that if we allow it, it can cause us lots of harm. 1 to 2% of the alcohol, 1 to 2% of our diets is alcohol. About 20% of the American diet is refined grains, pastas, breads, and cereals. About 20% of our diet is refined sugars, and about 20% of our diet are refined vegetable oils. And about 15 to 20% of our diet is obese meats. Less than 10% of the American diet is vegetables and fruits.
That's freaky, guys. 2 years ago, I didn't know this stuff, but after a couple years of having time to digest it, think of this video like a starting point, because I watched this presentation 2 years ago, and it was my starting point to start discovering the truth about diet and how it affects our health. Those are really, really scary stats, so let that sink in for a minute. the far majority of our diet is promoting these inflammatory processes which lead to chronic and long-term disease. Things like nightmares are made of, like Alzheimer's and dementia.
You got it. And so now that we have an understanding of how out of balance this is, what we have to do is we have to understand how to rebalance it. So what we're going to do in this next segment is we're going to start digging into, well, if we know what's bad, what the heck is good? So in this next segment, we're going to start digging in, break that down for you.